Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for today's meetup. On today's agenda, Chris will be providing an overview of the new public notification solution. Just as a reminder, we'll be recording and posting this meetup on meetups.com. And during the meetup, if you would like to comment or chat with other participants, then use the chat panel. However, if you'd like to submit a question for the team to answer, then please submit it through the Q&A panel. With that said, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Chris.
All right, thanks, Heather. As Heather said, we're going to be talking about the public notification solution today. And first, I just want to say that we're all in Ottawa, Canada at the R&D Center. So there's a picture of us working on a few new solutions for the upcoming releases. Feel free, if you're in the Ottawa area, to come on by. But if you're not, thanks for joining. All right, so for the agenda, today we're going to talk, I'll talk a little bit about public notification. We'll talk a little bit about the older application and what it used to do, and then we'll talk about the new application and what it can do. We'll talk about some of the workflows that the application supports, and we'll talk about how you can deploy it easily using our new solution deployment tool. We'll also give you a really in-depth look at the configuration for the widget and then how you can configure it for your own workflows, and we'll talk about some of the enhancements we made as well. And then we'll get some questions and feedback if you have some, and we'll even talk about what's coming next. So just to give a little bit of background, if you haven't seen our previous version of public notification, it was one of our more popular applications. The application was several versions old. It requires quite a bit of on-premise infrastructure, required a web server, that kind of thing. It also required, to generate the mailing labels, a geoprocessing service. It required a third-party library called Report Lab as well. It didn't really support web maps. It supported service style web application, and it was very powerful, but it was kind of a heavy lift to get started and get configured. So what we've done with our new version, which is still called public notification, and you can see here I've kind of dubbed it 2.0. It's a web application using Web App Builder for ArcGIS. It doesn't really require any on-premise infrastructure. You can fully host the application. It creates mailing labels just like the old one, but it doesn't require a GP service. So what's really nice about this app is it's very lightweight, and you can deploy it without having a GP service or any kind of on-premise server architecture to do that. It also supports web maps fully. And what's really nice is you can configure individual pop-ups within that web map to support the mailing labels that you want to generate. So we'll talk about that more in detail, but if you want to have a few different layers and you have a few different postal address formats or site address formats, you can support those simply through configuring the pop-up in the layer in the web map. It also supports related tables, and we'll talk about that as well. So we're trying to push a new pattern, which is this idea that you have a site address point or a series of site address points related to one or many postal addresses. So we'll talk about that in detail and how you can actually use related tables to create the mailing labels as well. One of the nice enhancements for the new version as well is that you can support points, lines, and polygons. So if you actually want to use the parcel information to generate the site address or owner labels, you can do that. But you can also just simply have site address points in your map and generate the labels from those. It also supports roads if you want to buffer a road and notify everybody along a parade route or a bicycle race, that kind of thing. Or if you want to notify everybody within a school district or attendance zone, you can do that as well. Those were workflows that were supported with the previous version. What's new here is that you can actually just add points to the map now and use those to actually create the labels. And we also have a series of custom drawing tools. So in addition to kind of the free-form polygon shape you can draw, you can customize that with whatever tools you feel you need to create the mailing labels. And we're actually doing some new things as well with the new version that we'll talk about in the what's coming section. So just without further ado, we'll jump out. I'll show you the application, and then what we'll do is we'll dig into the configuration and then talk about what else you can do with the app. So Here's the application. This is just the one coming from our Try It Live service, which is available on our solution page. So if you want to check that out, you can actually look at the same application you're seeing here and play around with it, see what you like, what makes sense, and then you can even choose to deploy it. But what you're seeing here is the public notification application that uses a widget within Web App Builder for ArcGIS called the public notification widget. And in this simple configuration, that's really all you're seeing. You're not seeing a layer list or a legend widget or anything like that. You're really just seeing the public notification widget inside Web App Builder for ArcGIS. We also have a nice informational widget here that kind of just talks a little bit about the application and then gives you some really simple instructions on how to get started using it. So you might want to even tower this specifically for the folks that might be using it within your organization. And give them specific instructions based on the layers and the configuration that you've supplied them. So just think about that as well, and you can get that from the deployment item itself, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so going back to the public notification widget, there's a couple things you can do right off the bat. You can just simply type in a parcel number or an address. In this case, I'll just go ahead and start with a parcel number. And you can see that when I typed in 12, it's giving me a list of available parcels that meet that search criteria. And I can simply click on one of them. It'll select it in the map. The first thing that you'll see as well is the pop-up showing up that gives me my first indication that I've configured the application correctly, which shows me the address information, which will be used in the mailing labels. And I can choose to just notify this particular parcel, or I can apply a search distance. And what you'll notice is that it's created a buffer around that particular parcel, much like our first version application, and it's applied a default search distance. And where it's actually getting that search distance from is the configuration of the widget. So if I chose to use a different buffer, for instance, if I was doing a road, I might want to apply a different sized buffer to that road, and you can actually specify a default for each layer that you configure in the app. So that's actually kind of a nice enhancement that we have in the new version. I can even increase the size of this if I'd like to, and it'll update the buffer size. The next section is really about how you want to notify folks. So by default, you're seeing the tax parcels being selected that are adjacent to and touching that one that I originally selected, and then the buffer applied to it. But I could say, well, I don't want to use the parcels for the notification. I just want to use my site address points. So I've chosen the addressee layer to be the site address points. And now it's giving me 62 addresses found. And it's providing me a series of pre-formatted mailing labels that I can print out. I can choose to print off a standard PDF label. If I hover over that PDF label, you'll actually get a little tooltip to tell you what Avery format that is. And we'll get into this a little bit further, but the configuration supports a wide variety of PDF formats, as well as CSV. And I'm only choosing to show a few different versions or examples of those formats here. But you can add in more if you want, if you have specific requirements around which, what size of label you want to create. And I can go ahead and download that particular set of addresses. So it's simply going to download it for me, creates a PDF. If I open up that PDF, you can see that it's formatted to that Avery label size. And in this case, I have 3 pages of labels. Notice that those are the occupant labels. So one of the things that we wanted to support were the actual occupants and owners. And I did mention in the first section when I was kind of giving you the rundown of what we're going to talk about today is that we can do related tables. So what's nice is that in the addressee layer section, I can actually choose to notify all owners and occupants. And those labels are actually generated from a related table and not the source feature layer. So, and we'll talk more about how to configure that further on, but it's the same workflow. You just pick from that addressee layer list. One of those might include a related table, and the pop-up's configured for that layer and then generates the mailing sheets. So that's the public notification solution. And that's, like I said before, you can simply deploy that using our new solutions deployment tool. So what I'm going to do is just quickly jump out to show you that, what that looks like. So I'll go ahead and open up ArcGIS Pro. And if you haven't seen this already, this is our ArcGIS Solutions deployment tool. It's been out for quite a while now. Actually, I say it's new, but it's actually been out for quite a while. And in this tool, which you install as an add-in as part of ArcGIS Pro, is all of our solution offerings, including public notification. And I can search for it with the deployment tool. I could get some information about what the public notification widget actually does. I can click on the Learn More link, which will take us out to the solution page. But even easier, I can just select it, choose to deploy it, and what it does is it creates all of the required layers. It creates the required web map and the application that you saw just a second ago. So all you have to do from then on is to load your content in. If you want to use the solution verbatim, the way that we supply it to you, all you have to do is load some content in there and you're ready to go. So what I'll do is I'll jump back out to my content. So what you're going to see as I logged into my ArcGIS Online account, I've gone to a folder where I deployed the public notification solution. And what you get is exactly what I mentioned. You get the 2 feature layers that are required of the application itself, and then the web map that drives the app. You can take a look at the schema that we supply with these feature layers. You can see how well it matches up to what you're using to manage address information, either in points or parcels, and kind of compare it to that. And then you can kind of take a look at the web map. So we'll do that right now. We'll open up the web map, and this is the first thing you're probably going to want to take a look at just to see how things are structured, how the pop-ups are configured, and how the layers are organized in the map. So on the left-hand side, we've taken those feature layers that are deployed with the solution, and we've added them to the web map and then configured each layer to do the address notification, like I mentioned. So if I go into one of these, so let's just go into the site address occupant pop-up. So I'll go ahead and configure the pop-up for this layer. And we use a custom attribute display option for the pop-up. And I haven't given the pop-up a title because all I really want to extract from that pop-up is the mailing label information. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the configure button. And when I do that, I get all of the required elements that make up the mailing label formatted the way that I want to see it in that label. So you're seeing the occupant as the name. So this is the occupant mailer, so we're not seeing the actual owner name. Or the occupant name, we're just generalizing it using occupants. The full address, the municipality, the state, and the zip code, and that's the actual label. Those are the elements that'll be used to make up the mailing label. And I can do the same thing for the other layers. I can take a look at the all owners and occupants one. This particular layer utilizes that related table. So I wanted to show that quickly. So we'll go ahead and configure the pop-up for this one. And you can see in this example, we're using the point related to a table that contains the postal addresses for that site address point. So in the pop-up, you're not seeing the source fields from the feature layer, you're seeing them actually from the related table. So you're seeing the relationship to the owner name, the postal address, city, state, and zip. And when the public notification widget uses this, it'll actually go after the related table information and not the fields in the site address points. So that's a nice enhancement. We're seeing more and more customers ask us about this, and so it's nice to be able to support it in the application. And hopefully you can find some value in doing that as well. And if you have any feedback for us, let us know. Kind of a new concept for kind of how we want to store postal address information. So that's that one. And then the final layer I want to talk about is just the parcel layer. So this one is configured against the parcel polygons. And much like the other pop-ups, you're going to see a very similar format here with owner name, except using the site address, city, state, and zip. And you can use the parcel information to do the notification as well. So instead of going after the points, you can choose that you want to create the labels from the polygons, the parcels, and it'll pull that information from whichever intersecting parcel the buffer has touched. So that's the 3 layers that we supply with the deployment tool. And then you, like I mentioned before, the site address, postal address related tables in here as well. So you can kind of take a look at that and see how that's structured in case you want to take advantage of that related table address kind of format. Okay. All right, so that's the web map. That is part of the configuration for the overall solution, so that's an important step. One of the things I didn't show was the loading of your content into these specific layers. You're actually seeing a web map that I've already done that with. So if I click on a parcel, you're seeing the pop-up. There's already parcel information in there. So that's one step. That's an important step you're going to need to kind of take a look at and review. And we include a nice loading tool within the solutions deployment tool so that you can take your content, which might be in a completely different schema than the one we're supplying, and load your content in, map over the fields that are required, or just see how everything's structured and use your own layer as it is. So just keep that in mind, that we do also have that tool. That's an important piece of the offering to help you load your content in, and that's just part of the solution as well. So the next thing I want to do is take a step away from the web map for a second, and I want to talk about the application itself. So I'm going to go back to my content. I'm going to now click on the web app itself, and I'm going to choose to edit the application. So this will be another step that you're going to want to go through to configure the application specifically for what you want to do. So what you're seeing here when you click edit is the base configuration, the same application that you saw me demonstrate in Web App Builder. And I'm going to go over to the widget section here and choose the public notification widget, and I'll click to configure it. And what you're going to see on the first tab are the searching and buffering settings. So when I typed in that parcel ID, that's where this is configured. So you can see here that I have two feature layers used for my search. I'm using the address layer and the tax parcel owners layer. And for the address, I'm just using the standard geocoder. So you can do that, or you can choose to configure just the site address layer itself. So you can search on it and configure it the way you want to for the searching. Now, if you have a result from that search, it will automatically be used to generate the secondary thing, which would be the buffer. So that, just keep that in mind. So whatever you configure in the search are things that you want to use to buffer. And so if, for instance, if you configure parcels, you can get a parcel result and then use that for the resulting buffer. Same thing for addresses. And that's in addition to the free-form kind of drawing tools that we have, which I'll talk about as well. Moving over a tab, actually, before we do that, let me just scroll on the bottom here. I want to show one more thing. I did mention when I was showing the public notification solution that you can configure default buffer distances for each layer in the app. So if you look down towards the bottom of the search section here, you can actually set a default buffer distance for each layer. So this is different for addresses than it is for parcels, and you can actually update that to have a different default if you choose to do so. So many jurisdictions have a default that they have to, I have to notify everybody within 300 feet of this particular parcel for doing a demolition, or if there's a land use update, that kind of thing, zoning change. You can actually specify the default in here so it automatically uses it versus having to type it in every time. You can also change the units, pretty simple, straightforward things there. And then the next section is really about those drawing tools I mentioned. And in the example that I was showing, I only had point, polyline, and polygon drawing tools enabled. But we also have just a standard line tool and a freehand polygon tool if you choose to use those. Or if you don't want anybody drawing in the application, you can just turn that off. And then the same thing, there's a default for the drawing tools themselves. So if you want to apply a 0 distance or a 300-foot distance, you can do that, and then specify the units in which will be used for that default buffer for the standard drawing tools. All right, moving on to the address layers. These are the layers in the web map that actually generate the mailing list. And it's important to kind of take a look at these, especially the ones that we're delivering out of the box with our solution deployment tool. because these will actually be used right off the bat to generate the mailing labels. And what you'll see is that some of these don't have related tables. So for instance, the site address occupant layer, we're not using the related records, so that is not checked. For the owners and occupants, we do want to use the related table, so you have to specify that here in the configuration. And then for tax parcels, they're just tax parcels with no related information, so we're using those as well. So those are the 3 layers. They mimic and they mirror the layers that were in the web map. So just kind of take a look at that. If you're not using related tables, obviously you want to uncheck that box. The notification options section is the last section you're going to want to look at. This is where you set any default PDFs that you want to generate. So in the case of the try live example and the deployment example, we have 4 PDF choices available as well as CSV. But you might want to create larger labels for specific types of malwares, and you can choose to turn those on as well. And it's going to give you very specific dimensions for each one of those PDF formats. So you can choose to turn some on or off, or if you only you only create 1.5 by 1.75 inch labels, then just turn that one on. So it's a quick little tip there that there are some other available PDF options. One of the more important things on the bottom of the page is how you want to actually generate the labels. So you probably noticed when I executed that PDF generation for the malwares, it was really quick, and I generated 3 pages of labels like in seconds. And that's because we're using vector fonts for Latin-based text. And so if you're using a Latin-based font, then we recommend that you use that option. If you're in a non-Latin language and you want to create labels, if you uncheck this box, it'll actually create raster labels for those. And then you can even choose to show the alignment aids on the page. And so this isn't an option that you're going to want to keep on all the time, but if you want to kind of fine tune and see how things are lining up on the page before you fully commit to, printing off a bunch of Avery label sheets, then you can actually turn on these alignment aids and it'll print off, on a standard piece of paper how well those labels will line up, and you can kind of overlay them on top of the Avery labels just to make sure everything's going to fit nice and tidy, and then do that. So there's an option for the alignment aids, and that's just something that you're going to want to take a look at as a test before you fully implement the widget. Okay, and that's pretty much it for the configuration. One of the things that we don't do in the default version of the app that we deliver with the deployment tool is include things like districts. So if you want to include, like I mentioned, school districts or attendance zones or special tax districts or taxing jurisdictions, you can do that. So just keep in mind that you're going to want to add those into your search source if you want to use them to actually generate labels within a certain boundary. So you can do that. You can also add in roads. So if you want to notify everybody along a road, that's one of the search sources that you're going to want to configure. One of the things that's really nice about the application too is you can use the polyline tool and just draw along. I can just show it to you here. Draw along the road and simply apply a buffer distance, and you can also generate malwares along the road just by drawing on the map. So if you want to do it that way, you can do that. But also if you want to add in those specific roads, you can do it. There was a question I had just this morning about bicycle races. So there's a bike race coming through town. They've created a route for that. They want to bring that route into the application and notify everybody along the route. That would be very simply done by just creating a layer that was empty and load those routes as you create them into that layer, and then use that in the application. So all of those things are supported. So just keep that in mind too. The example that we're giving you kind of gives you a baseline configuration, but you can expand on that and add additional elements to your web map that then are used to configure the widget and the application. So just keep those things in mind, and if you have any questions about that, this would be a good time to talk about them. So yeah, that's the application, how you can deploy it, the configuration, and yeah. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. So we'll just stop there just for a second. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. Heather, are there any questions coming in?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few. Did you
Okay.
want to take some?
Yeah, let me just bring up my PowerPoint real quick, and we can just go ahead and take those, and then we can move on.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Scott's question is, will this be available in Portal or just ArcGIS Online?
That's a really good question. Currently, the widget is only supported in ArcGIS Online. It will be coming on board around the UC timeframe when they update Portal. Typically, with a lot of our web app builder widgets, they first show up in Online, and then they end up showing up in subsequent releases of Portal. So right now, the way it is, you'll only see this widget in ArcGIS Online.
Perfect. Sean has a question. What are the necessary steps prior to launching the solution deployment tool? It seems that we would need all the data sets in the map prior to launching the tool and what data is needed. You kind of went over that, but if you wanted to explain in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so I didn't explain exactly how you install the solutions deployment tool. So we can send out a link in the chat to go and get it. But basically, it's a add-in for ArcGIS Pro. So you want to install that first. You can deploy the solution without any data in your map specifically first. So you can kind of deploy everything, take a look at the layers that are deployed with that solution, then add the appropriate layers to ArcGIS Pro. And then once you've done that, those layers are actually used as a source to the tool to load your content. So there's a couple tools that are inside, tasks actually, that are inside the solutions deployment tool that walk you through that process. So you're going to want to use the load data task to load those layers up, if that makes sense.
Okay. Greg has a question. We are looking to use the public notification app, but we need it to grab site address points where the buffer intersects the parcel, that the address lines are, or the address lies on even if the address isn't within a buffer. Is there a way to capture this point? And also the site address point may be different than the address associated with the parcel occupants versus owner.
Okay, yeah, it's a little bit of a loaded question. I think to answer the first part, I think I understand what you're saying. Currently the application will buffer a specific parcel and will retrieve whatever intersects that buffer in the address layer. So right now it will not go a step further and find intersecting parcels and then go and find any point that sits on that parcel, even if it sits outside the buffer. So that's something we're actually considering adding to the widget currently. The only way to grab those additional points that may be just outside the parcel boundary is to increase the buffer size or use the drawing tools that are available currently. But we are looking at that, and I'd like to get some more information from you on exactly what you might need if that doesn't answer the question. And then I think the second part, Heather, was more just about the kind of difference between owner and occupant labels.
Yeah, it was the site address point may be different than the addresses associated with the parcel.
Yeah, absolutely. So you probably have, owners that are getting malwares at their specific owner address, which might be different than the site address. And how we've tried to account for that is, the parcel boundary, most likely the parcel polygon most likely contains the owner address information. So even though you're getting parcels, you can still use the owner postal address information to notify that specific person at their postal address, not their site address. And if you have the site address information, obviously you can send a malware to the site address that might not be the owner. So it might just be the occupant at that particular residence. You can do either of those. The other way to do it is through that related table that I mentioned. So you might have a site address point with a set of related postal addresses. And that's the other way that you can model that scenario. So you can maybe load up your postal address information into that related table and then experiment with that.
Okay. Brian's question is for the site address occupant layer pop-up, why was the state and the zip hard-coded instead of pulling that information from a field like name, address, and cities?
Yeah, another very good question. We actually don't. So for that particular address label, we didn't have the situs or the actual site address, city, state, zip included in the data set that we're using for the deployment tool. So that's something that we're actually going to address probably in the deployment item itself. But if you don't have those elements, obviously you can't create the label for them. So we were just generalizing that to the city, state, or actually municipality and zip code. But if you have that information in the layer, obviously use that in the layer pop-up config.
Okay.
Yep.
And Scott's question is, can you use a polygon from another layer, such as one created by the value isolation tool? I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. As an input for selecting parcel or point features such as water meters?
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that input layer, but anything can be configured in the search. So you can do roads, like I mentioned. You can do those bike routes. You can do the parcel boundary. It can be a district. It could be anything that has a geometry, point line or polygon that can be configured in the search can be used to buffer. So I think it'll probably work. I don't see why it wouldn't, but if there's something specific about that layer I don't know about, then I can't really answer it. But if it can be configured in the search, you can use it for a buffer is kind of the idea there.
Cool. Steven's question is, can you add other PDF label size options manually?
Currently, no, but it's definitely something that can be done. And if you have specific formats that you'd like to see that aren't there, definitely let us know. We do have the ability to, technically speaking, generate any size label, but we'd like to include kind of a default set that most people are going to use. We wanted to also keep the configuration really simple, so by doing that, it would have been quite a bit of work to make sure that all of those things were accommodated in the configuration. So to answer your question, only the ones you see are supported currently. If you have additional ones that you want us to add, we can take a look at that. We can also look at additional capabilities in the future to support customized labels, but currently we don't.
Okay. To kind of follow up, Scott had mentioned about the valve isolation tool. It's actually, he meant to type valve, yeah, valve isolation tool. Okay, sorry.
Okay. I'll look
Hey,
at it, but I mean, like I said, any feature layer that you can configure in that search could be used to buffer. So
hey, Chris, this is Scott.
yeah,
The one probably important thing there, right, is you need a feature. It can't be a graphic layer, right? And search
correct.
select from a graphic. So if the valve isolation tool actually writes the results of that valve isolation to a feature layer, then like you said, in theory, I could pick up that feature layer and search for it, for example,
Yep.
and then find all the valves or customer accounts, maybe is a better way to do it, that are intersecting that isolation. Yep.
Yeah, and if they were graphics for some reason and you couldn't get an output, you could still add those to the map,
Yeah.
and maybe use the drawing tools to draw over the top of
Right. Yeah.
that
It'd be a
area.
little more manual probably, but yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Jennifer asked, can you select multiple parcels, I should say, without drawing a polygon?
Yeah, you can. So if you just want to select underlying parcels, we have some really exciting new functionality that's coming with the next release that we can show you, or at least talk about it today. And if you need more detail, we can show it to you, maybe aside from the meetup. But currently, if you wanted to select multiples manually, what you would do is use the standard drawing tool and generalize that area, and it would, use that shape to select the underlying parcels. But we're adding some new capabilities with the next release that will really help you with that.
Okay.
It'll make it better than what we have currently.
Kyle asked, can this app/widget allow for printout of the map showing the buffer and the notified properties?
It can. The current theme that we're using in the deployment version of the application is doesn't support that workflow, but there's a couple themes that do. One of them is called the Dart theme. So if you change the widget to use that theme, you can create your buffer. It'll give you a preview of what, how many properties will be, or how many malwares will be created for that, and you can switch over to the print widget, and it will not remove the buffer. With the current application, as you saw it, as soon as you click over to the print widget, if you were to add it, it would deactivate the buffer and it would disappear from the map. And so there are some web app builder themes that do support that, but not the one that I showed you today. But the Dart theme is the one that you're going to want to take a look at.
Okay. May had a question. Will you add in the capability to modify your selections? Basically, a last chance to select and unselect what has been buffered automatically.
That it is in our backlog to deselect and add additional or append, additional features to the shape that was generated either with the buffer or the drawing tools, but currently it does not support that. I can talk about some of the enhancements that we're making, and that I think it'll also help you in that regard. So not currently, but we're working on it.
Okay, yeah, and similar, Cassidy, is there a way to add or remove from your selection?
Yeah,
Many times we've had duplicates. Okay.
Yeah, same thing. So we can talk about that, and it'd be great to talk with you even after the meetup to see and to kind of talk about when we're doing new things and how we can get those types of enhancements, pushed further up the list. But those are things we've heard about. We have an issue currently in our backlog to add that capability. But I think some of the things that we're doing with the next version 2 will definitely help.
Okay, so there's no set availability date. That
Not yet.
was one question that came in. Okay.
Not yet. Yep.
And then Bill had a question. If some addresses have additional lines, does the output know just to skip those lines if not present?
So I think I know how to answer it. I might be wrong, so let me know if it's not the right answer. But
Sure.
The pop-up, you can put spaces and things in the pop-up if you needed to space out the top 3 lines from the next 2. And you can add additional lines into the pop-up, and they'll show up in the label as long as you have enough room in the label. So we have different size labels you might want to take a look at that'll support those extra characters. But if you're trying to jam it onto a standard, Avery label sheet that have, I can't remember the number, but the 90s or the 91s, it's probably not going to fit. But if you do the larger labels, it'll probably fit on there. So you can add additional lines to the pop-up with additional information, and they'll show up in the label.
And also Mike Tashuti mentioned in the chat window, yes, and that blank lines are removed.
Okay, yeah.
That makes sense.
So yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, perfect. That is all the questions for now.
Okay. All right, so talking about next release, since there were already a couple questions that alluded to some of the things that we might be doing going forward. Our next scheduled release is in April, and this is kind of a general update, but we do have some enhancements in the widget itself, and we'll probably be adding, of course, those capabilities to our Try It Live and the deployment tool version. So they'll have, we're adding a few new selection tools. So this will allow you to actually select features on the map and then generate the malwares from those features. Currently, you have to either draw a graphic or get a search result specific. As I was typing in a parcel number, get a result, and then use that, or use the drawing tools. But we're now adding selection tools, so you can really customize what gets selected on the map and then what gets generated in the malware. So if you need to add in additional parcels, as an example, you have really tight control of that now with these new selection tools. So look forward to that. I think that's going to help people out when it comes to modifying before they print. So I think that should satisfy a couple of questions we had today. And I'm more than willing to kind of share with you those enhancements. So if you want to connect with me after the meetup or through the meetup page, Heather, we can we can set up a quick meeting and I can show you what we're up to and make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do for your workflow. The second thing is arcade support. So I don't know if anybody's worked with arcade expressions or attribute expressions within the web map pop-up. We're actually now going to support that. So if you want to do something like you're seeing here, for instance, you might have two owner names, owner name 1 and owner name 2. And if owner name 2 is empty, then don't even bother showing it on the mailing label. So here you're seeing just an arcade expression that does that. You know, if the owner name is null or empty, then you know, then don't show it on the mailing label. And you can also concatenate and things like that. So you can have owner 1 and owner 2, you know, with the ampersand between it, that kind of thing. And we're also making updates, minor updates for CSV output, just some things that folks found with some strange characters in the output. We've addressed a couple of bugs there. And the selection, as I mentioned. So now you can actually go in and perform just like, I want to click on the map and select that underlying feature and use that for the notification, in addition to the additional selection tools that are available. So those are just some of the things we're working on for the next release. And if you have any other comments or concerns, or this didn't work for me with the first version and you want to see it in the second version, let us know. So that's the release schedule. Any questions on that?
Nope.
Coming in. Okay. Okay, and I, you know, just to close, if there aren't any more questions, we can still take them after this slide. But I just wanted to talk about some of the upcoming meetups that we have. So we're going to talk about public crime maps and apps on April 12th. Heather, you're probably going to announce this as well, just to kind of preview those. Crash and traffic planning maps and apps in May. And then for the user conference, we're going to have a kind of kickoff to that about our UC release in June. And those are the kind of upcoming meetups down the pipeline. Any more questions?
I did not mute myself. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I've been speaking to myself for the past minute.
It's okay.
Yeah, thanks everyone. We look forward to seeing and hearing from you at our next meetup, which Chris had mentioned. It's Thursday, April 12th, where we'll be providing an overview of the public crime maps and apps. Until then, have a great afternoon, everybody.
Hey, Heather.
Yeah, did you want
Before you
to?
break.
Sure.
No, just before you break, Mary had a question. Chris mentioned that he'd be willing to share some of the work we're doing on the next release, maybe more specifically with users. And Mary had a question. She thought we mentioned another meetup. Actually, Mary, we'll just send Chris or contact us on the meetup site, and we'll schedule a time specifically with you so you can review it.
Okay.
Yep, and if anybody else has similar requests, you know, just let us know. We're more than willing to share kind of what we're up to, and we'd like to get feedback.
Yeah.
We always want feedback.
Yeah, Greg has provided me his information, so I'll pass that along to you.
Okay, great.
Okay, perfect. Have a great afternoon, everybody.